Hey everybody, this is Season 2, Episode 7 of From Guns to Keyboards. We're sorry it took so long to get this out. We've been meaning to record for a while, but with Michael being in Miloim, and with life just being life, it's definitely been a long break between episodes. The episode is actually going to open in the middle of a conversation that Michael and I already started having about the Shas political party threatening to leave the coalition. The date at the time of recording was the 4th of June, in the year 2025. So with that, let's get going. So what do you like? Do you think it's gonna happen?
Wow, man, I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to tell with the Haredim how much of this is like posturing and how much of this is like.
They're actually gonna bolt from the coalition.
Yeah.
Because that'd be fucking crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if they want everybody to hate them, right? Because like the left already hates them.
Right.
The religious Zionists are getting pretty fed up with them as well because they won't join. And if they break apart like a right-wing coalition, that's it. Like they've just closed the door on everybody.
Yeah. Well, like what's interesting here is I'm hearing a lot of commentators coming up with these theories that like actual Haredi society has already changed and has already since October 7th moved to the direction of like we want to enlist, and it's like the leaders who are conservative. I feel like it's bullshit. I feel like everybody is basically on the same page that we should in the Haredi society, meaning that enlistment should be avoided as much as possible.
We should just go to B'nai Brak one day and just walk around and be like, what do you think about this? There are people who do that in Israel, actually. They just stick camera in people's face and they're like, what do you think about this issue?
Right.
It'd be interesting to kind of just see that a little bit, just to be like, hopefully they won't like stab us or anything, but just to be like, what do you think about the whole enlistment thing? You in, you out? Because it would be interesting. Like, it would make sense. There's a divide between the younger Haredi versus the older Haredi in terms of enlistment.
Well, I also feel like you just encounter a lot of Haredim that just don't want to enlist because the army just sucks and has no clear benefit for their day-to-day life. It's not old school Israel where like you really couldn't integrate into society in a real way without joining the army. Regardless, the Haredim are not interested in integrating into society, and there's very many potential avenues of economic success in Israel that are not dependent on the army. So like,
well, politically, they're geniuses. I mean, what other sector in Israel is like, we're not going to work, we're just going to pray all day, and you're going to give us money for it?
Yeah.
Like, they've made themselves like very powerful to the point that no one is willing to actually touch that. So them leaving the coalition, like at the end of the day, I say everybody will hate them, and they will. But when push comes to shove, like you're going to need the Haredi to build a coalition. Yeah. They're like the fastest growing demographic in Israel. They're going to continue gaining political power. I mean, my dream scenario would be, all right, the Haredi leave, we go to elections, and we have like a Likud without Bibi form a government with like a centrist, I think it makes most sense, like a centrist Lapid, Gantz type coalition, and then together they pass a law that's like, you can't vote unless you join the army or do national service.
Yeah, you
like do like a Starship Troopers type thing. Service equals citizenship.
This is the.
I can see the ads. שירות משרת, לא משרת. שירות משרת אזרחות, כאילו כזה.
Something like that.
Something like that. That'd be awesome. I would love that.
All right, Dillon. Well, we found your calling.
When I become fascist dictator of Israel, it's the first thing I'm gonna do. No, but I mean, like, I maybe not something quite that draconian, but maybe something in that direction. All right.
Well, that's what Edelstein was proposing. Edelstein was basically, I don't know if I only saw the list on my walk over here, like what he was actually proposing.
Okay.
That like pissed off the Haredim, that like made them just like leave in a fuss. Like, no, we're not gonna deal with this. What I imagine in my head of the way this meeting going is just like the Haredim being like.
Bye.
Like I imagine this like this very like kind of like dismissive, not want to hear anything, and I think from what I gather online, the Haredim basically were told that Edelstein is looking to promote a bill that would increase taxes on Haredim, that would like cancel all of the government benefits for Haredim.
So really, that is quite draconian.
Like very, 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 very draconian sanctions. The specific details of it is like all like the, like your tax benefits that you get in your income tax for like different reasons would all be canceled for anybody who doesn't serve. currently there's a tax benefit in Israel when you buy your first home, but that benefit would not be extended for people who don't serve. There's like all sorts of like discounts on like Arnona, like the Israeli version of real estate tax, and like other types of taxes. All of those would be canceled.
Which one's Edelstein again, by the way? What's he do?
Edelstein is currently the committee chairman for the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee.
Okay. And so he's president that bill. So it does sound like, it just sounds like kind of a hardball negotiating tactic then. If they're just like, we're not even going to come to the table, and we're going to take away your power. It's pretty strong incentive for. They've seen kind of how Bibi's been smacked around by Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. Yeah. I think for them, it's just sort of like, hey, if you just threaten to leave the coalition, you kind of get whatever you want.
Yeah.
And I wonder too, because do you know how it works, by the way? The opposition is preparing a bill to dissolve the government.
Yeah, it's like any parliament.
Is it just like a majority vote situation? Do you have to get at 61 people voting yes for that?
So there's all sorts of different ways in which the government could be dissolved. But the basic parameters of it is that opposition takes advantage of this coalition crisis to submit a bill, hopefully gets coalition members on board. And if they get a majority, I'm not sure if it's a...
I don't think anybody
if it's a voting majority or a sitting majority. If you get that majority, then you...
All right, if it's a voting majority, I think they have a chance. If it's a sitting majority, we're at 61, there's no way anybody from the coalition is going to join the opposition. They've been branded as leftist traitors.
Yeah.
Joining them, it's like, that's it. Your political career is over if you're in the current coalition.
Well, I'm also, which is what kind of makes me suspicious that maybe what the Haredim are doing is just part of this big game. Because
it's a hardball negotiating tactic.
It's a hardball tactic because they know that the right has a huge chance of losing the next election. The Israeli public is not forgiving to much of the right wing for its failures on October 7th. I think, by the way, most of them are forgiving. Just to make that totally honest, I think the vast majority of people who voted for the right wing parties in previous elections are going to vote again for Bibi and the right wing. I just think that they'll get that very, very small amount that will be nah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
And that might tilt it the other way. And the hard time that they're getting passing the evasion law in this Knesset will be 1,000 times harder if Yair Lapid is elected prime minister.
Yeah.
So I think that the Haredim are kind of playing this game of chicken where they're like, oh, we'll form a government with the left. We all know.
They're not even saying that. Just saying we're going to dissolve the coalition. It's which is I think that's the biggest criticism that Bibi gets, is that he's more interested in political longevity than he is in any real military objective in the Gaza thing.
Well,
what do you think about that, by the way?
You brought it up.
I did bring it up. I hear it literally everywhere.
All roads lead to Gaza.
All roads lead to Bibi being a piece of shit.
Can I bring up a point that I know is going to piss you off?
Bring it up.
I have to say, the whole American mercenaries coming to Gaza, setting up distribution sites, with massive public relations issues surrounding those distribution sites, accusations that Israel is massacring Palestinians receiving aid outside of these sites. With all of the shall we say, for an understatement here, hiccups along the way, I have to say that I think this is the biggest game changer of the war.
Why would that piss me off?
Because you're not a fan of these intermediary solutions of
what are you talking about?
Mercenaries without a political solution for Gaza.
I said I'm suspicious of mercenaries, but I was interpreting mercenaries as people fighting the war on our behalf, which I think is not a great idea.
Yeah, probably not.
Probably not a brilliant idea, but dude, the food distribution, I think it's fantastic, and I agree with you. I think finally, I said it almost a year ago when we were talking about this. I even wrote about it in a Medium article where Israel is lacking. Not only is Israel lacking propaganda, but the government is actively making it difficult for people who want to be pro-Israel to be pro-Israel, because they're for instance, earlier on in the war, Israel was immediately fielding accusations of, oh, you guys just want to occupy Gaza, and all the pro-Israel people were going on various news channels and tweeting and whatever, being like, we don't want to occupy Gaza. This has this is solely Hamas, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And you got fucking Smolarich being like,
yeah, we totally
want to
occupy
it.
That's exactly what
the minister of Treasury, like one of the third most powerful people in the government, be like, no, we're totally in it to occupy Gaza. That's exactly what we're here for. And all the Israeli propagandists are like, well, shit, like you've completely you've cut my legs out from underneath me. Now I need to defend this. And it's like, that's the part about, like, about a year ago, I mean, there were like photos coming out when the war started of, I guess more like a year and a half ago, of like, there's a famous one I remember that made the rounds in Israel media of an IDF officer pushing a Gazan woman in a wheelchair. Not like shoving her like off the wheelchair, but like, helping her in the wheelchair. Just to make that clear. And Israelis were sharing it and saying like, look what a good army we are. And that was it. There was nothing else after that. And it was just dead kids. And so it's nice to see that for once, Israel's able to actually share something of like, look, we're trying to help these people. We're trying to actually do something that's going to undermine Hamas a bit. And the fact that this whole look, the thing with the IDF potentially, shooting a bunch of Gazans, the biggest thing that a lot of people are saying, because you can't trust either side at this point. You just can't. And so a lot of people are just saying, well, it's time to let the journalists into Gaza. And the IDF always says, no, it's too dangerous for them and this and that. And a lot of journalists are saying, we know it's dangerous. We were involved in the Syrian civil war. We went to Somalia during the anti-piracy operations. We've been everywhere. We know it's dangerous. We've lost a lot of colleagues. We're cool with that. We want to do this. Let us do our jobs. Let us be able to confirm on the ground ourselves what's real and what's not, instead of having to just listen to two notoriously unreliable sources who have both been caught multiple times lying.
But you agree with me that journalists...
I don't agree with
No, you must agree with me. You must agree with me.
Of course, I agree with everything you say.
Journalists are not, for the most part, designed in practice to uncover facts. That might be what's written on their Medium profile, but in practice, they have an agenda.
If the journalist
that agenda, by the way, might be pro-Israel.
If the journalist is using Medium, by the way, their career is on the outs. I feel very bad for them. Yes. Hey, no, please go on. Sure. No, I get your point. Of course, there are partisan journalists. Of course. And there are going to be stories, especially this late into the war, where people have kind of made up their minds one way or another. Of course, there's going to be stories of we interviewed this one guy and he told us this, and that meets the journalistic standard, so we're good, we can run the story, and we're on the ground. That being said, if Israel, to me, it not letting journalists in just shows a deep insecurity on Israel's part, and it makes it look like we're hiding something, which I'm sure we are. But I think if you really want any chance of having like instances like this, and by the way, it also, if you have journalists at these sites, these food handout sites, it makes them very difficult for like Hamas to attack. It actually kind of aids Israel's war aims, because once the journalists are there, I mean, they're filming everything. It's all live.
I actually don't agree with you. I think that...
I thought we agreed with everything the other person said.
No, I mean, you know how these events evolve in Gaza. How many times was there like a clear exchange of fire between the evil terrorists bandaged in their Hamas garb on the one side and the Israeli soldiers on the other side? It never plays out that way. The way it plays out, according to a journalist's lens, is the Israeli soldiers in their garb fighting against who the Israeli soldiers believe to be armed combatants. But looking at the situation, everybody has their own interpretation who you're fighting against. It could look to an international audience that, in fact, you're shooting on a bunch of unarmed civilians, where they might be very much in practice armed Hamas members.
Maybe.
But can't we just, like... I want to take a different...
No, I know. I mean, hold up. But like, maybe, right? Like, maybe you're right. I'm not discounting that. I think you could be right. But that's, like, a very specific scenario. And on the other hand, maybe Hamas does some crazy stuff, and the journalist is like, yeah, this is clearly Hamas, and the Israelis, actually, we did do the investigation, and the Israelis did not fire on these people, and they are truly trying to assist in this particular instance.
Look, maybe from a strategic perspective, you might be right.
Maybe.
You might be. But maybe if I can have like I don't know, a war for dummies conversation with you. Not strategy, what's good for Israel or good for this or good for that. Just like straight up discussion of morality and war. I think that we're a little bit too preoccupied. When I say we, I'm referring to both the entire Western community in general and even much of the Israeli-Palestinian commentators in particular, with over emphasizing how moral we are in this conflict. Can't we just be honest that there's no way to come out morally superior in a conflict whose entire purpose by design is to kill as many of the combatants on the other side? There's absolutely no way in this equation I could come to any sort of conclusion in which I can objectively say one side is morally superior than the other. Based on my own definition of moral superiority, I can certainly say that we're more superior than Hamas, that's for sure. But can't we just be honest and just say, we're in a game of just killing people. That's the game that we're playing here. And, we might do all these little tricks to, like, make us look better in the media. You might be right. Like, this might make us look better. Sure.
It can't make us look worse because the only thing people are getting is just Hamas videos, right?
I'm just talking now, like, not strategy, not like what BB should do. I'm just talking like Dillon and Michael here. Like, is there any real moral escape for us here? Like, aren't we just kind of like blinding ourselves to the basic reality on the ground that this by definition is just a mutually immoral situation? And by the way, when I say immoral, I don't think it's necessarily a cause to change behavior. Maybe we need to accept that this by design, war by design is immoral, but this is a war that's worth fighting because we don't have any other choice, the way I see it, at least for now.
Damn, bro, I didn't know you're such a pacifist. Well, yeah, I mean, you kind of dive in a little bit into just war theory, right? Where it's like, as long as you have a just cause, and how do you prove a just cause, and it kind of goes down that whole rabbit hole. Yeah, you're definitely not the first person to make this argument that war is just inherently immoral, so why stop there and just go all the way, like whatever you have to do to make victory, to end the war as quickly as possible, right? That was the argument a lot also with like the United States using nuclear bombs against the Japanese. Just end the war as quickly as possible and potentially even save lives.
Or you know what, even less violent than that. Just like, let's stop pretending to have the facade that we're this beacon of morality. Both sides are trying to do it, but Hamas is also trying to do it. The protectors of the Palestinian people, the this, the that. We're also trying to be the great Western democracy fighting the evil Palestinian terrorists. Should we just say, we want to beat them? We're playing the game.
So what would you like to see happen then?
Well, I like to say that I'm not having a strategy conversation right now. This is just like,
well, like what? So what? Because you kind of sound it. I'm hearing it as, let's wash our hands of any pretense of morality and let's just go balls to the wall, guns blazing. Like, so my question is like, what, like, where are the brakes? And where should we go from brakes to gas?
I don't necessarily look. I have personal brakes. Yeah, like there's some red lines that I, as a person, am not willing to cross. I from my perspective, believe that the intentional targeting of civilians in war is a red line that should never, ever, ever be crossed. Okay. Ever. What I'm referring to now is not how Israel should design its grand strategy for moral warfare. I'm just trying to say that morality is both a philosophical term and a PR term. Should we, from a PR perspective, be playing the moral game to come out the stronger side? Yeah, sure. We should be doing that. We really should. But, when it's just like Dillon, Michael, and our podcast listeners having this conversation together.
Love you guys. All five of you.
When it's just us, let's be real. This is just a game of public relations. This is not an actual moral question at play here, because there is no real moral way to carry out this war. I think there's red lines that we could avoid crossing, but beyond that, is there any solution that I can reasonably think of that Israel can fight this war without Palestinian civilians dying along the way? No. Is there any scenario that I realistically
Wait, hold on,
see
just real quick. Let me
Palestinian
just jump in real quick. So I told you what you're saying. So then I guess the question is like, what are those red lines? You said not intentionally targeting civilians. That's a red line.
Red line for me.
What are other like red lines that as long as we just go up to that point, we're good, and that's good. That's it.
I could describe other areas that are red lines for other people that are not red lines for me.
Ah, here we go.
Which I think, yeah.
Bloodlust.
Which I think, yeah. Look, from my perspective, I mean, tell me what you think. Yeah, I mean, do I view demolishing a home that is questionably part of a terrorist network as a red line? No, I don't. If I see a building, that's a tall building in Gaza that threatens forces that are maneuvering in that area, and I have absolutely no reason to think that that building is tied to Hamas, do I have any moral qualms tearing down that building, the cement of the building? Absolutely not. From my perspective, there are others who would say that this is a war crime. This is whatever. I genuinely, I personally don't.
No, I don't think it is a war crime if a civilian building is being used for military purposes. It's fairly well established that destroying a civilian infrastructure that is being used for military purposes without causing undue harm on the civilian population is not a war crime. That's fine. I think the issue is that people just don't believe Israel when they say things like every other building in Gaza has weaponry in it.
But I love what you just said. I love that. Because what do you implicitly say? What you're saying is, yeah, but it's a PR problem.
It's a trust issue.
Right.
Sure. And Israel has made no effort. By the way, I'm going to make one quick point. Embedded journalists really could have solved that problem. A couple of embeds from Reuters, AP, could have, and like those have been the guys who've been like, yeah, we went in with Golani, and I kid you not, these guys are not lying. Every building had RPGs and Kalashnikovs and tunnel entrances, and the IDF went and destroyed it, and I think that they were right to do so. That would have been amazing. Why do you think Israel is not? It's not that they're not winning the PR war. They're not even trying. And in fact, like I mentioned earlier, they're just actively making it more difficult for the people who are trying to do the PR battle on their behalf. Why do you think that they just don't care?
I actually think Israel cares a lot. I just think it's really bad at it.
You think it's just poor effort?
Yeah, I mean, well, poor effort is one way of putting it. I just think they suck. We suck. It's not one of our strong suits. It's
but as smart as Jews are, right? As smart as Israelis are, we're very smart people. I think we understand the machinations of foreign governments. I would say that the Israelis almost understand the internal mechanisms of the U.S. government better than most people who work in the U.S. government. Like, we are able to navigate those halls with relative ease when you compare it to pretty much anybody else. That was whenever I'd say the British government as well. So we get that so good.
Yeah.
You're just saying we just don't get it. I find that hard to believe.
Well, if I look at the target audiences that over the past 20 years have been targeted so well by the pro-Palestinian movement, even in the United States. I look at all of the various coalitions of minority groups in the United States that, whether it's Native Americans, Black Americans, and others, that have largely, not to speak in general stereotypical terms, but many of the coalitions representing these groups have sided with the Palestinian cause in recent years, I think is reflective of this Palestinian success in understanding their target audience. It's the basics of any good marketing. Understand your target audience. I think Israel knows how to create good messaging, but for its audience. I think the Palestinians succeeded in thinking about different ways to connect its narrative to its target audience, which Israel didn't do. Israel didn't think about successful ways, at least in the modern era, of connecting its narrative to Black Americans, its narrative to Native Americans, its narrative to this, its narrative to that. Earlier Israel was great at that. Now, obviously there's a game here of like how much material do you have to work with? Yeah, it's like taking a company that has a terrible product and telling it to market well versus another company that has an amazing product and telling it to market well. Clearly, if your product is suffering from some issues, there's no real way to work around it. Yeah, like Israel's earlier product from like the 40s and 50s was an easier sell objectively as this, little David fighting the great Goliath of the Arab world, then post 1967 Israel, the I say in quotation marks, the evil occupier of the native Arab populations of the Middle East. So I'll at least give Israel that excuse that it's working with a worse product versus what it had previously. But yeah, I think that we just don't understand how to target our core audiences here.
So who do you think, who's receiving our message then? Who is our core audience, and who's receiving our message? Just I guess start from square one. Who's our core audience?
I was looking recently at the IDF LinkedIn page, which I occasionally will repost from them and do likes or whatever.
I've seen you. You come on my feed.
Yeah, I have my moments.
I LinkedIn.
Like you go IDF. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I actually think they have great content. Like they really, really do have great content. They speak even with like a Gen Z kind of style of talk. You can clearly see that they have serving on staff in this part of the spokesperson unit, probably Americans or other international.
Are you talking about the IDF spokesperson's page?
Yeah, the IDF spokesperson's page on LinkedIn, serving in the Army, giving that perspective. But I'm not the relevant target audience here. Like, I'm always going to love their stuff. We have to target other audiences. The other audiences that we really should be going after are, if I look at the American demographic, our biggest challenge as a country is that the core coalition groups that vote Democrat every year are increasingly siding with the Palestinian cause. These are groups that we should be targeting. We need to think about ways to revise our messaging to target those groups. Now, I'm talking a big talk here, but do I have like a practical way of doing that? Probably not. It's not easy to as the strong Goliath player here that is, in the eyes of many, occupying the West Bank and Gaza, to suddenly spin out some messages that make us seem like this little David fighting the grand evil of the Islamist world. But we should at least try.
Okay. I think that Israel, I agree with you that we should at least try. I think Israel is not trying. I think that that's the biggest issue.
Why do you say that?
Why do I say that? Well, first of all, Bibi Netanyahu, our esteemed leader, has done a grand total of 4 press conferences in 20 months. That's a bit weird, having a leader who's leading a country at war. Yeah, a bit uncomfortable, I would say. Having a leader, of a country at war who is not allowing the press to speak to him, to ask him questions, to defend his decisions of his orders to the IDF. I think that's, and Bibi Netanyahu is he is our secret atomic weapon when it comes to messaging. The guy, from his early MIT days, was constantly advocating pro-Israel. He's fantastic in front of the camera. He has a presence. He has a deep, booming voice and he just commands respect as prime minister of a country. The fact that he's holed up in his office and not coming out and not speaking to anybody, it just feeds into the suspicions of, he has really no argument about the war and he's not interested in discussing it. He's just interested in politics and just maintaining his longevity there as much as he possibly can. He doesn't want to field questions like, where the hell were you on October 6th? Yeah. What's going on? How did this happen? Why is this happening? And why are the hostages still there after 20 months? Why is Hamas not defeated after 20 months? The guy doesn't want to answer those questions because he's smart enough to know that the perception is stronger than reality. And once he's being asked that question, once he has a reporter yelling at him, it doesn't really matter what's being said. The fact that a reporter has the cojones to yell at a prime minister makes him look weak. And he needs to project strength at all times. He likes to do softball interviews. I think he did an interview with Dr. Phil a while back. I think it was the last time I saw him. This was I think last summer, in fact.
Got really grilled on that one.
Yeah, oh yeah, Dr. Phil, he is a geopolitical genius. He knows the ins and outs of this conflict. Oh my God. He made sure to definitely come out and announce the beeper attack against Hezbollah. He definitely made sure to have some photos taken visiting southern Syria. He visits Gaza from time to time to rah-rah the troops, but no questions, no reporters. So I can go on, I can pontificate on this for quite a while longer, but you get the idea. That's number one. Israel is not trying. Their leader is hiding somewhere and refusing to go in front of the camera. So as a result, the message becomes a little bit crazy. No one's quite sure exactly, like, all we really have to go on is biyachad nenaseach, like, together we're going to win, and free the hostages and destroy Hamas. Okay, cool. So when people come at you and they go, why are there so many dead Gazan civilians? Israel doesn't really have, like, an answer. Or the answer's always clunky and awkward, and they're different depending on which Israeli expert you're talking to. There's no unified message. There's no attempt from the government to try and rein in these powerful, influential voices who really want to be there for Israel, who love the Jewish people, who believe that Israel is a completely justified in engaging in war with Hamas. But these people are just kind of being hung out to dry by the government that they're trying to defend. And as a result, people are starting to say, well, the government is silent about this stuff, and the only things we do hear out of them are from the most extreme people who just don't care how they come off. They don't care about their international reputation. They just want to say things like, we're going to reoccupy Gaza, and the Gazans are Amalek, and they're terrible, and we're going to get rid of them, and don't worry, and da-da-da. And so they have to answer those questions. So, yeah, man, I feel like the people who and then as a result, when these people go on shows like Joe Rogan and Piers Morgan that get tons and tons of traction and tons of eyeballs on them, and they get asked, why is your Minister of Treasury saying that you're going to commit ethnic cleansing? And you kind of watch them, well, it's Hamas's fault. And it's like, dude, what is this? Like, the government is actively making things difficult for these people. They're not attempting to appeal to any audience in the United States. They're not attempting to appeal to Christians. They're not attempting to, like, the group in the United States. You said the Democrats. The Republican Christian fundamentalists are by far our strongest supporters. And, if you read, like, the American Conservative magazine, which is, like, one of the biggest magazines for, like, American fundamental Christians, more recently, articles have come out that say things like Jesus would not approve of this war. Like, Jesus is not for these types of actions. How can you call yourself a Christian and support Gaza? We're not even trying to reach out to those people and say, no, listen, like, this is the land of Christ, and we are the defenders of, the places in Jerusalem that you consider sacred, and we can't let radical fundamentalist Muslims come and take this area. We have to do this fight, and the reason why we're doing X, Y, and Z is da-da-da-da-da. None of that. That is not happening. The government's not saying anything. These people are being just sort of left out to hang and dry. I think Israel is gotten so used, I'm going to end it here. I think Israel's gotten so used to being in the power seat for so long that they've forgotten how to mobilize grassroots movements. It's kind of like what the conservatives had going for a long time. Like, the conservatives under the Barack Obama administration were just so cringy because they've been in power for so long, they forgot how to do grassroots mobilizing. And it really wasn't until, like, the Biden era they really hit their stride, and conservative content just went through the roof. It's fantastic. And now we see the result. Trump's round two. Israel has not managed to mobilize any grassroots movement. They're just used to big, usually friendly, mainstream corporate media interviews and speeches next to U.S. politicians. And they're picking the worst time to do that because Americans don't trust their politicians anymore. They don't trust their media anymore. So these avenues that Israelis were so comfortable using are gone to them. And in fact, even the mainstream media is is abandoning them a little bit, is abandoning the Israelis. They don't feel quite as comfortable as they used to platforming pro-government Israeli voices. So yeah, I think...
so we're doing great.
We're doing awesome. Keep up the great work, government. No notes. No notes. But yeah, that's why I think that they are not trying. That I think is... and I'm sure there's more reasons that if I wrote them down would come off more beautifully, but this is just off the top of my head. So yeah, I think my question would be, A, do you see where I'm coming from? And B, why do you think Israelis are like this? Like, why do you think that they're either, whatever the answer, bad at PR or not trying? Like, why are Israelis just like, You talk to Israelis on the street, they don't care what the world thinks. They really don't. Why do you think that is? Let's start with question A. What your thoughts on what I just said?
I actually think Israelis do care what the world thinks.
Okay.
The average Israeli.
Okay.
I have in my mind right now a couple of classic Israeli stereotypes of, like the Gaitzik that I buy fruits and vegetables from, and like the Israelis that I encounter in Tel Aviv, and other Israelis. Each one has like a different level of dismissiveness or non-dismissiveness of the international community. It definitely goes both ways, but yeah, I just think that Israelis have this prickly outward facade that does not play well in PR, and I think that like what we love about Israelis just kind of like say what they think, and don't really think about too much else. Is on one hand kind of sweet, but when it comes to fighting this dimension of war that we're fighting, the PR war, it plays out terrible.
Actually, you know what? Because I would just counter that by just saying, okay, so if the government really cared, then they could just hire a couple of American PR firms to train some of their people to speak to American audiences or speak to British audiences, whoever they happen to be talking to. That actually reminded me of something that I recently learned, and I don't have all the exact details, but that the government did have a Ministry of PR and Propaganda, and the minister resigned from that post, stating that she said that she didn't want to be a minister of a just basically nonsense position that was wasting taxpayer dollars at a time when a nation was at war. That she felt her patriotic duty was to simply step down because the government wasn't interested in that office in entirety. It was just a makeshift situation that they could act like, they could posture. She has not been replaced. So, but having if that position was actually real and people were serious about it, you're right, Israelis are prickly. Any culture that, anytime a foreign country wants to interact with another country, you have to kind of learn their nuances a little bit and learn their cultural idiosyncrasies. And we're fortunate in America, because it's such a big nation, because they're so used to foreigners coming to speak to them, that they have professional PR firms that you can pay tens of thousands of dollars to, and they will train you how to speak to Americans. Like they are very good at what they do.
Well, look, I don't know if Israel is not already paying for these PR firms. It wouldn't surprise me if Israel's paying for a leading PR firm. I don't know how much they're using them, but paying for them somewhere and have them on their.
I would actually be surprised. I think because we both can agree that Israelis do come off very prickly and terribly on TV. Yeah. It doesn't seem like that there's it doesn't seem if those PR firms are doing it, they need to fire them and replace them. And I mean, B, it really doesn't seem like the government is putting in money and funds to. Private individuals might be doing these on their own, but I don't think the government is investing in this.
I don't know, but by the way, I don't know if the answer here for Israel is necessarily bringing in the big PR guns to explain how to interview, how to explain things.
No, that's not the answer. That's just one tool in the tool chest.
Right, and I think that Israel can learn from its other PR successes. Israel is very successful from a PR perspective in the target audiences that it's very comfortable with, and I think Israel can learn from that.
Which is just American right-wing Jews, basically. At this point,
not only like I think of another PR campaign that was deployed, or PR is not the right word. Public diplomacy is a better word. That was used on
I call it propaganda.
Audience. Propaganda, public diplomacy.
I'm not shy.
It is what it is. Like there's no morality.
Call a spade a spade. Yeah. It's propaganda. This is Palestinian propaganda or Israeli propaganda. Which one do you feel like eating today?
That's right. No qualms either way. But look, even sidetrack, and then I'll go back to my original point. Definitely some to all of the Palestinians killed outside of these aid facilities didn't actually die, right? Like a lot of these incidents were probably made up by Hamas, and I don't want to get into it like whether they were totally made up or partially made up or not made up. But obviously, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that the world believes that they were made up, that they were not made up. The world believes that these Palestinians actually did die. They read the BBC articles, and they don't care about the White House clarifying statements that these things didn't happen and the BBC should do a check and blah, blah, blah. Like, nobody actually cares. And this is a PR victory for Hamas, right? Like, it doesn't really matter what actually happened. What matters, like, maybe from a moral perspective it matters, but from I
get your
PR
point.
Dimension perspective, it doesn't really matter.
What's the greater point?
Well, What is my point exactly? Oh, I know what my point is. I was going to talk about...
We were talking about target audiences as well. You're saying that Israel is really good at its target audience,
Totally,
and
yeah.
I said that
I'm
it was
on it.
right-wing American Jews.
I'm on it.
Okay.
So, Israel's success in PR can be very accurately reflected in what it did with Birthright. Birthright is still a program where Israel brings young American and other international Jews to Israel to go on a free week, 10-day trip. I don't know how long it is. I was too dumb to take advantage of it before I moved to Israel. And basically go back to their host countries and be ambassadors for Israel. This is not taking some like awkward like 50-year-old general and explaining to him by these great international consultants from like these top firms in New York how to talk to a camera. No, this is a different type of public diplomacy where you create ambassadors, kind of what you were saying earlier, Israel's inability to develop that grassroots movement. I 100% agree with you. I think here, with the target audience that was comfortable for it, it did develop that. It basically said, we're not going to go in front of cameras and make this whole thing. We're going to develop tens of thousands. I think 500,000 Jews have done Birthright until now, something like that. A crazy number. A crazy amount of international Jews have done Birthright. And those ambassadors have so much more impact than any, with all due respect to Dover Tzal, to any IDF LinkedIn page or Facebook page or what have you. We have to think about how we can take that success and replicate it for other target audiences. Can we succeed? It's a hard game. I don't know if we can succeed. We're selling a product that, from the perspective of those target audiences, is a really, really bad product.
Well, Israel's always...
Well, we should try.
Israel has not been terrible at making sure that it's safe and comfortable and enjoyable for Christians, especially, to come to Israel and to tour the country and have lots of these tours that have more of a Christian perspective for them. Again, these aren't government funded, as far as I know, but the Israeli government has facilitated and tried to grow them in the interest of tourism and of creating these kind of, like you said, relationships, grassroots relationships, you want to call them that, with the Christian community around the world. During a time of war, that is kind of off the table a little bit. Not a lot of people want to come to a country that's facing bombardment, and it's less, I think, that also has kind of a limited effect because, yeah, you're right, it's been 500,000 people, but over the course of like 10 or 15 years or something, Birthright's been going on for a very long time. And so to be able to bring that mass numbers of people here, because we need a message that can be shared very quickly, and we need a message that sounds good to on modern media, which is how do you get something short, quick, and memorable into people's heads. And right now, the Israeli government is really putting out a message that is relatable to most people. The Israelis don't have anything to show, right? We don't have those photos of IDF soldiers pushing Gaza women in wheelchairs to try and get them out of harm's way.
Yeah.
We just don't. And kind of to tie it all back to the aid thing, that's why this aid thing is why I'm happy about it, because at least it gives us something, but we can certainly be doing more. We can certainly we can have, in order to ensure the safety of these aid locations, we can have journalists there, at least there at the aid location. We don't have to take them with us into Han Yunis or wherever, but to show like, hey, look, they're eating, and oh my God, there's gunfire. But if you listen to the recording, it's a Kalashnikov gunfire, so it's unlikely to be the IDF.
But you know, I'm happy that you tied this back to the aid question. And it's a shame we don't have somebody. I thought you would be my devil's advocate here on the aid thing, but you and I actually agree on this issue, so that's not fun.
I've been advocating something like this for a long time. We both have been advocating for something like this for a long time.
No, but in this format,
just because it was a mercenary, you thought anyone would like it?
Well, it's bringing mercenaries to take care of it. It's choosing very specific aid locations that are designed according to the critics of the plan. According to critics of the plan, it's designed to encourage Palestinian migration or internal migration from one part of the Gaza Strip to the other. That the aid plan will not take it, be able to reach the level of scale and relevance to the entire Palestinian population. But actually,
See, I don't even need to say this. I just tricked you into doing it for me.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'm good to go.
No, I feel like because you agree with me on this issue that we have to bring in this like third voice.
No,
that,
my
is
biggest
more
criticism of the aid issue is that it was not implemented or even attempted sooner. That the IDF waited 20 months to implement any kind of aid distribution that didn't go through Hamas.
But you know what? I agree with you. But I want to take this conversation down a different route if it's okay.
Take it away.
I think that the entire aid question here, or the distribution of humanitarian aid in Gaza, has, at least over the past few weeks, been a PR disaster. I think the distribution centers got set up a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, something like that. Thus far, it's been a PR disaster for Israel. The international community is looking at this as an Israeli attempt to promote ethnic cleansing in the Gaza Strip. It looks at all of the supposed massacres, I say in quotes, that have taken place outside of these distribution centers, and is criticizing Israel for doing this. Would Israel have been better off from a PR perspective to continue the blockade for another 2 weeks and not allow any humanitarian aid into Gaza, or to allow humanitarian aid into Gaza under this framework? That's a question that we will never know the answer to. But to tie this back to my original point at the beginning of this podcast, why are we even playing this game? Like, shouldn't we just be like straight up like, listen, we're not monsters. Our goal here is our core goal is to undermine Hamas. That's our core goal. The side effect of that is we're going to feed Palestinians along the way. But our core goal, what we really care about, is we want to divide and separate Hamas from the civilian population, and therefore get us closer to achieving the war goals of destroying Hamas as a governing and military entity in the Gaza Strip. That's what we really care
That
about.
would be more than what we're currently doing right now. Like, that would be much more. We're not even doing that at this point. Like, we're not out there just saying, hey, straight up, like, our core goal is undermine Hamas, and this is doing that. And, oh, by the way, it's also feeding these Palestinians, which we care a lot about.
But that's
wink, wink, wink.
Right, but neither side actually cares about the other, right? Like, this is a PR question.
Well, it depends what you consider sides, right? Because if you are someone who does want to go publicly and say I'm pro-Israel, then you're not against Gazans. You're against Hamas. And so Gazans, to you, are innocent civilians, and they should not be killed under any circumstances, right? That's one of your red lines.
No.
And so ensuring that their deaths, well, they shouldn't be targeted. Excuse me, not they shouldn't be killed. They should not be targeted. And so ensuring that they have a longer chance of survival is in Israel's moral interest.
No, for sure. I myself, I'm definitely happy about this wonderful side effect of the aid program, that Palestinians using the aid program will be able to eat and have access to regular humanitarian supplies. I am happy about that. I don't want mass Palestinian civilian deaths in the Gaza Strip. But you ask me honestly, like, me, you, and our listeners on this podcast, you know
you are.
Exactly. You're asking me, like, what do I actually care about? Like, what's my core goal here? My core goal, I'm not waking up in the morning like, wow, let's feed the citizens of Gaza. No, I'm at war with Gaza right now. That's not my core goal. PR also is not my core goal here.
So you do look at it as war. Hold on, 1 second.
Let me
No. This is important detail. You see this war as a war against Gaza, not a war against Hamas.
I think
that's important. Be honest. It's just you and me and our listeners.
Me, you, and
the 5 people on the other side who all know us. Hi, everybody.
I actually think it's more nuanced than that. I think that it's okay to say on the one hand that we are at war with Gaza, where Gaza is a full-fledged country that decided to invade Israel. I think with the relative estimate is like something like 5 brigades that went to fight at the same time, or brigades in the Hamas context, like Western context, refer to this as one brigade that invaded Israel on October 7th. This is a country that went to fight Israel on October 7th, and we're fighting that country, and we're currently occupying parts of that country, but we're fighting that country back.
I think you are factually incorrect. I'm sorry.
That a brigade invaded Israel?
No, dude, that part you are perfectly fine about. Calling Gaza a country? Come on. Who? No one
They're
in
a
Israel.
country.
No
They're
one in
country.
Israel. What? Why do you double down on this for? No one in Israel considers Gaza a country. No one. You are literally the only person in the world that considers Gaza a country.
That's why I'm unique.
Do you know that? Are you aware of this?
No, Gaza before October 7th and on October 7th was a fully fledged, de facto, not de jure, de facto, a country.
Don't speak French to me, fucking asshole.
I'm insulting Dillon's French sensitivities.
Fucking talk to me in that language.
Is that French or Latin?
I don't know actually. Du
So-
jour, I think it actually can be both, but it's descended from Latin, right? So
Exactly. As a non-French person, I'll say.
Listen, so you see it as we're at war with a country.
But can I clarify my point before you?
No, we're
jump
gonna
down my
say
throat?
that, and that's it.
That's
Putting
it.
that on TikTok. Don't even try. Yeah, please clarify.
No, I think that for sure, from a de facto perspective, Hamas leading up to October 7th was a fully fledged country that decided to declare war on Israel as a country, and we are fighting back now against that country.
Okay.
Right? Does that give us the moral justification to completely destroy the country and destroy all of its inhabitants? No, I still have that red line that I'm not willing to cross, that I'm not willing to target innocent civilians, regardless if it's a country that invaded us or a terrorist organization. It doesn't really matter. I don't have like a moral implication from that statement. But factually, a country decided to launch a brigade-level invasion of the state of Israel on October 7th, and we are fighting that de facto country until today.
I'm going to try and say this as professionally and nuanced as I can. I think you're living in La La Land.
Oh, yes. Dillon, please tell me the La La Land I'm living with.
The country part. You know, the country part. It's La La Land.
Why?
Because a country requires international recognition.
Nonsense.
Why?
That is a modern Western definition of
No, it's not.
country.
Actually, I think it's a very important distinction. For instance, look at people who don't have countries. The Kurds don't have countries. And when they got invaded by the Turks or the Iraqis, who came to help them? Nobody. The Uyghurs don't have a country. And when China began throwing them in concentration camps, who came to help them? Nobody. The Kashmiris don't have a country. And every time the Indians go in there and start killing and torturing people, who comes to help them? Nobody. When, in 1991, when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, a country, a sovereign country, who came to help them? Everybody. When Russia invaded Ukraine, who came to help Ukraine? Everybody. There is a big difference between, and it is perspective, there's a big difference between a region or a place and a people and a country.
For sure,
Huge
there's a
distinction.
difference between a region and a country, but that's not my argument. That's
Then
a
why
reframing. of
why
my
call
argument.
it a country?
First of all, let me take apart your argument. You're saying that the Palestinians don't have international recognition. They do. They are
Not
international
as a
recognition.
country?
We don't recognize them. We, the Israelis, don't recognize them. But for sure they do. Gaza and the West Bank are recognized. Palestine is recognized by many countries in the international community, including by many of Israel's close friends in the West. So they have that international.
So
recognition.
Norway and Spain, you're making the argument,
Not just them. They have.
would
I
see
think
it
they have
as
dozens
a
of countries that have
national
recognized them.
invasion.
So let me ask you a question. They have dozens of countries, dozens. I don't know the
Literally
exact number.
dozens.
Literally, no, actually.
I know. I'm just saying.
I'm pretty sure
It just sounds funny.
It wouldn't surprise me
Uh-huh.
if the number of countries that recognize Palestine is higher than the number of countries that don't. It wouldn't surprise me.
Are they
but
recognized
it's at least close.
in the UN Security Council, where it actually matters? Are they
Is
where
that
where
the
international?
definition of a country?
Yeah, where international law determines whether or not you're a country and what laws apply to you.
Dude, okay. If you're going to talk with me about La La Land, you're basically taking modern social constructs developed in the 1940s onwards and saying this is the definition of a country.
I mean,
I'm not referring to Westphalia.
I hate to break it, bro, but that's first Westphalia came hundreds of years before that.
Exactly,
I'm
but
talking,
I'm not
but
referring
you're
here-
saying that these social these social contracts don't matter. No, I'm arguing that they matter very much. I agree with you. There's certainly social contracts, but they matter a lot.
But again, I want to go back to the core of what I'm saying. The core of what I was saying is that Hamas.
But again, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying that this was not just like a couple of people in Hamas that attacked us.
No, that's actually not what I'm
this
saying.
is like the
Let me-
resources.
Let me just finish this out. What I
Alright.
was saying is that there is a difference between de facto countries and de jure countries.
Oh, I remember this. Okay.
And like what you're basically saying to me is like they don't have international recognition, but that's just like playing into like exactly what I said, that they're not a de jure country. They're not an official country. Hamas was not officially recognized as a country governing the Gaza Strip beforehand. There was international recognition of Palestine, including the West Bank and Gaza Strip, and all these different things. That's not my argument. My argument is that it was a de facto country in the fullest sense of the word. And this de facto country...
In what way? Maybe clarify that. In what way?
Full sovereignty within its borders. That's the definition of a country. What is the definition of statehood, in my opinion? Statehood is a monopoly on violence within your borders. The individual or the organization that monopolizes violence within that jurisdiction is the state. And Hamas, by definition, de facto, not de jure, de facto was the state and is the state until today in many parts of the Gaza Strip. That state decided to go out and fight us on October 7th. Does that mean that we have the right to indiscriminately kill Palestinian civilians? Absolutely not. We don't. I would even say, like, the most extreme examples in world history, like, take us fighting Nazi Germany in World War II, where atrocities were committed against the German population in World War II. I would, even in that extreme situation, say that we don't have a right as an international community to target innocent civilians in war. Intentionally target innocent civilians
That's
in war.
fair.
That being said, I do believe, what is the therefore argument of what I'm saying? I do believe that a country, in order to function in a fighting war against Israel, another country, needs resources. And therefore, we have a right, as one of the two parties to this conflict, to destroy as much as possible the resources of the other side. And those resources include territorial resources, whether it's using buildings in an urban landscape or using other resources that's to its availability. Adding on to that, using humanitarian aid as a weapon to basically take over and continue its rule of the Gaza Strip. We have a right, as a country in this battle, to take down, break down, and fight each and every one of these resources that Hamas is using to its benefit.
Michael, I know you want to call Gaza a country. I would argue that having actually de facto military control over a region does not make you a country. Otherwise, mafias would be getting international recognition, and they're not. International recognition really matters, whether we like it or not. Whether or not we want to say, hey, you guys have all the functions of a state, so you're a state, we're just not going to recognize you. I'm sorry, it doesn't work like that.
But, okay, so...
If
can
this
I
were...
challenge you?
Not right now, let me finish. If this were a battle between two nations, like two recognized nations by the UN Security Council, I think this would be a very different war. Because you're right, a country being attacked by another country is very different than an insurgent group or a terrorist organization, in this situation, who is living in a small piece of the world where they're not granted the international recognition by the UN Security Council, by the major international bodies that actually matter. So they're not given diplomatic and economic access to a lot of those areas. They are, and also, by the way, they're not allowed to do things like, I don't know, decide what goods are able to move between their borders. They're given well, actually, you know what? I'm not even going to go down that path because that's actually not a conversation I want to have. But they're not. There is a big distinction there, and I think just kind of hand waving and dismissing that is it's disingenuous.
Well, it's a shame that there's no video in this podcast because I'm hand waving and dismissing all of this. Because at the end of the day, let me ask you a question here.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of the ship paradox?
No. Oh yeah, if you take apart a ship, but please say it. I really like it.
I'll say it for the benefit of our listeners because I think it's relevant to this conversation.
It's a really good one.
You take a ship and you replace one of its parts. Is it a new ship? Most people would say no, it's not a new ship. It's the same ship, just with one of its parts. You take apart 10 parts, 20 parts, 30 parts. Is it a new ship? Still no. It's still the same ship. It just has new parts. If I then take apart 50% of the ship and I replace it with new parts, is it a new ship?
Right. The question is, at what point does the old ship become the new ship?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Then you'll start to get different answers. If I then replace 100% of the parts of the ship with different replaceable parts, is it a new ship?
Mm.
Now, what's interesting is that in this conversation, you'll see that different people will answer on different levels when it becomes a new ship. There are those who will say it's never a new ship. There are those who will say once it breaks the 50% barrier, it's a new ship. There are those who will say that it's a new ship once they add that one component. I want to compare this metaphorically to the recognition of a country. Let's say for those listeners who don't know, Dillon and I are recording right now in a meeting room in Tel Aviv, in Fishman. Let's say that Michael Harris decides on Frischman Street in Tel Aviv to take this meeting room and declare it as an independent country, and nobody recognizes him because Michael is crazy. Who would recognize this meeting room as being part of this independent country controlled by Michael, the supreme leader of the meeting room and all of its inhabitants, including Dillon? Nobody would recognize me because they would say, hey, Michael, you're crazy. Yeah. Well, let's say I somehow convinced Dillon, one of my closest friends, to somehow say, you know what, fine, I'll recognize you as being an independent country. One person. But that's one of 7 million people on this world. Would I still be considered a country? I would imagine most viewers would just be like, hey, you're insane. What is the point at which I pass that threshold? If I get the recognition, let's say of 1 billion out of 7 billion, that's still a minority. 1 billion out of 7 billion inhabitants of the world. Do I become a country? If yes, then what threshold did I pass along the way to become a country? If no, then what threshold do I need to pass in order to become a country? All of this is to say, what is like this long drawn out argument where I bring in philosophy and all these like weird arguments, and I somehow became the dictator of this meeting room in the course of this conversation? What is all this to say? That recognition and our perspective on things is all relative, and there's no real definition here. Michael, in his brain, will perceive what a country is different from how Dillon will perceive it, is different from how a pro-Palestinian activist in the United States will perceive it, is different from how a pro-Israel activist in the United States and abroad will perceive it. What matters is power. What matters is if you're the guy with the gun that controls your immediate area of responsibility. And Hamas has the guns, they have the power, and they control their immediate territory of responsibility, at least until October 7th. And for that reason, I say that Hamas absolutely, and by any reasonable definition, was a fully de facto country up to October 7th that decided to launch a brigade-level invasion of the state of Israel. And they, as the leaders of that country, should suffer the consequences of any country that invades another sovereign country. Does that mean that we should be targeting innocent civilians? Absolutely not.
So, okay. So
absolutely not.
I can appreciate what you're saying, but let's tie it back to the original question then. Are we at war against Gaza or at war against Hamas?
We're definitely at war against Gaza, but we should fight this war as if we're at war against Hamas.
Because what's the distinction?
That's Michael Harris's warped moral distinction of the war.
So what is the distinction?
Michael Harris's warped and personal and super subjective and not correct at all distinction of the world is that we should fight this war where we view only Hamas as our enemy. Is that the morally objective right way to fight the war? Not necessarily. Mm-hmm. There's a fair argument to make that Hamas is a military machine supported by a civilian population, and therefore, just as the Americans made that argument that we should target the industrial centers of Germany during World War II, that Israel should also target the industrial centers of Gaza in this war and actively target innocent civilians. That argument can be made. I, according to my own objective or subjective morality, don't believe that should be the case. I think that we should fight this war as if we're fighting Hamas, if we're fighting.
But in reality, but that's what I
understand. But in reality, we're fighting a country.
But in reality, be at war against Gaza.
That is the reality. We're fighting a war. This is a.
But you're saying so because from what I'm hearing is the distinction is you're comparing it to World War II again, and you're saying, look, in World War II we were at war against a country, against an empire, and so we target innocent civilians as a result. Whether or not you agree or disagree with that, that's just what happened. We're currently now at war with the country, so, and that's what I don't understand. So we should then be targeting innocent civilians, or we should just say, hey, we're just at war against Hamas. We only want to target Hamas. That is our goal.
So I think that no matter what, even if it's a war against a country, which is why I brought up Nazi Germany as the example, the most extreme example of evil country, Michael Harris will refuse to target innocent civilians. Even in the extreme example. Even in the example where I know I'm going to die, I will not target innocent civilians. I will not. However, that being said, I do believe that there's other questionable moral, shall we say, dilemmas along the way in warfare that I think become less questionable when fighting this kind of war. Take, for instance, what we were discussing earlier about destroying parts of the urban landscape. Not people. Cement. Do I view this as morally questionable when we're fighting against a country, the state of Gaza, ruled by Hamas since 2007? Absolutely not. I don't see any moral dilemma with that at all.
Well, we talked about it a little bit too, saying that the IDF's reason for doing so was just due to the amount of military equipment being stored in these areas. But you're saying, regardless of military equipment, no military equipment, just flatten everything?
No, I think that if there's military equipment stored in these areas, and as we talked about in our previous episode, we definitely see that in something like 50% of the houses that we went
I
from
know,
Gaza,
I know.
they
We
were
said,
tied to
but
Hamas.
I just don't understand. Like,
But
why even say this? Like, what the distinction? I'm sorry, I'm not understanding you. Like, I don't understand what's the distinction between we're at war with Gaza. Are you saying that you, Michael Harris, don't want to kill innocent civilians, but as long as you're not the one pulling the trigger, it's all good?
Absolutely not.
So what are
Absolutely
you
not.
saying then?
Doesn't matter who's pulling the trigger. Innocent civilians should not be killed. What I'm saying is that
Or targeted. That's the big distinction too. Not killed, not targeted.
I ideally not killed, ideally, but definitely from a policy perspective, they should not be targeted. Absolutely not. When it comes to destroying cement, look, we have a limited amount of ammunition. We don't have unlimited. We don't have the economic and the logistical capability. At least as of now, who knows what will be in another couple of months or years, to destroy all of Gaza. We should focus our efforts on buildings that we believe are tied to the Hamas organization. And I want to believe that much of Gaza that was destroyed was reasonably tied one way or another to Hamas. But I'm not even talking about what was. There's a distinction between what was in Gaza and what Michael believes is fair play in Gaza. Do I think it's fair play to destroy a building that has no tie to Hamas? But I know from an operational perspective that this building is a building that is tall, supports the operational movements of Hamas guerrillas in that specific theater of war, and can threaten the maneuver of my troops into the Gaza Strip. Do I think it's moral to target that building even though it has absolutely no connection whatsoever to the Hamas organization? Absolutely. I think we should.
I think there are stipulations actually that talk about maneuverability in warfare. I'm not sure. I think in for most cases, if you're talking about, hey, listen, we just want to create a road, most people would be inclined to agree with you. But I think so. Okay, so
can I take my can I give you material to challenge me?
Please. I feel like I don't have enough with the whole country thing. That was just I totally agree.
Well, let's take this to a more extreme example, right?
Sure.
Israel has decided, and it's said this publicly. This is not a secret, that there are certain areas of the Gaza Strip that's flattening completely. Entire buildings, entire neighborhoods, it's completely destroying. Especially neighborhoods that are neighboring its border with the Gaza Strip, meaning neighborhoods that are very much sit next to the border with Israel. From the perspective that Israel cannot
hold these
itself
areas
reasonably and hold the territory and create a security barrier without flattening these neighborhoods that are sitting on the border. Are these towns all connected to Hamas? Are all these buildings connected to Hamas? Probably not. Do I have a moral issue with that? Absolutely not.
Okay.
Because
that's because we're at war with Gaza in your mind, and not with Hamas. If we were only at war with Hamas, you'd have a moral issue. But because we're at war with Gaza, it's not a moral question.
Absolutely, of course we're at war with Gaza. Hamas.
No, I know, but I'm trying to find where the distinction is, because most people, when they go publicly and they advocate for Israel's war in Gaza, they call it the war in Gaza against Hamas, not the war against Gaza.
Well, it's a shame they didn't pay for my PR services, because I would suggest a different route, where we're saying that we're fighting a country-on-country fight on an unconventional battlefield against a guerrilla force called Hamas inside the Gaza Strip.
So actually, I have a question then, though. So I might be able to agree with your assumption or your assertion that we were invaded by de facto country on October 7th. But once Hamas no longer has military control over the Gaza Strip, doesn't then Gaza cease to be a country at that point?
So I'll take you back to that's a great question, but I'll take you back to the strip analogy. At what point did they stop being a country? When we took over the north part of the Gaza Strip, when we expanded the security barrier to include a kilometer into the Gaza Strip, when we conquered Rafah, Khan Yunis, at what point did they stop being a country? So, again, everybody will have different answers to this question. There's no right or wrong to this question. It's by definition a trick question. There's no way to say by definition it stopped being a country. What I am saying is that, and this I do believe is objective. I don't believe this is just Michael Harris's opinion. I think this is a truly objective opinion. De facto, in practice, they have continued to be a country from October 7th until today, to varying degrees in different parts of the Gazan territory. Moasi is a part of Hamastan. There are central neighborhoods in the northern part of the Gaza Strip that are a part of Hamastan, that are completely controlled by Hamas. There are parts of Deir al-Balach. All of Deir al-Balach has not seen any maneuver of the IDF since the beginning of the war. This is Hamastan. This is a full part of Hamas, of the Gazan government, of the sovereign state of Gaza, that's recognized by some.
I think it's very difficult. First of all, this is not how countries are defined by international law. So that kind of just because you're right, because it does get to the ship construction dilemma. And additionally, I think it's hard to consider Hamas a government when the standing order of the day has been, since basically 2006, kill them wherever you find them. Like when Spain and Norway and these other countries are recognizing Palestine, they're not recognizing Hamas as the government. The opposite. They're making it very clear they don't recognize Hamas as the government. So I think it's and you know what? Whatever, we live in an age where, don't listen to the experts. Everyone's got their opinion, and that's fine. And I get your de facto versus de jure argument. I really appreciate it. You do make a point. I'm not gonna pretend like you don't. I do think though that I just think there's a lot more nuance and holes in the situation that because I guess I can say that because someone or even several someones considers a country this way, there really is that line that is drawn legally between this is a legal but even as I'm saying it out loud, that's just one way of defining country, legally versus not, versus perception and whatever. So you know what, I'll concede. You have a great point. I personally wouldn't call it a state, but I can understand where you're coming from. But anyways, what I'm trying to understand. So is it just calling it a state out of principle then? It has really no bearing on IDF military tactics or strategy within the Gaza Strip?
Yeah, dude, just a straight up principle. I'm 2 beers in.
Why the fuck didn't you say that when we saved us 20 minutes of conversation? Jesus.
It doesn't matter at all. This is completely irrelevant.
You kept acting like it matters. You kept bringing up Dresden and all this stuff, and I'm like, okay, so how does that tie in? And it's like, it doesn't. I'm just saying shit. God damn. We should do like a moderator here at some point. All right. How are we doing on time? I think we actually might be. Look at that. We're way over time. All right. Well, we got some editing to do anyways. So I guess let's call here.
Call here.
It's a fun way to end it. Yeah. Consensus. You know what? It's a mark of true dialogue and friendship. I love it. All right, guys. Thank you for listening. We'll see y'all next time.